the web of life.
Let me try from the first to indicate the point that we're aiming at. The point is this, that human consciousness is at the same time as being a form of awareness and sensitivity and understanding, it's also a form of ignorance.
But it's so important to ask the person, to request for them, and invite them, in fact, to say, by saying, if you could just hear me out, listen, with openness, with no judgment, and hear me, and listen. Whether or not you agree, whether or not you understand, that will come with it. But as long as you open that up, you just feel much more comfortable with being able to share, whether it's a hard conversation, generally with someone it's a hard conversation to have. And then the other aspect, when I shared this with somebody else recently, and the response wasn't, they didn't like what I had to say, and it wasn't because of what I said. I'm generally pretty good about what I say, but I was direct and I was honest, and it was not an opinion, though but I did add to that conversation that when you hear truth is hard to hear. It's hard to accept. It's hard to understand if you don't want to hear it.
And are you saying that by being more direct, you're noticing it having a negative impact on your relationships?
It's having, not negative, but it's more, I'm feeling better that I can actually voice and being honest and open with them, and hopefully to nudge them, to give them a new perspective. I think it's having an effect on the friendship, yes, as in they might not want to hear it, they might not want to accept it, and so maybe they think differently of me.
This theme of boundaries keeps coming up with you.
Yeah.
And I think the way, my personal take on boundaries, and I haven't said this, but maybe it'll open some things up for you, is there's no such thing. Because it's too exhausting to go to everybody in the world and tell them how they're supposed to show up for you, in your words. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of fucking work. Yeah. And that
sounds exhausting.
And that it's almost creating an assignment before being able to engage in a conversation, and people are going to be looking over their shoulder. So the boundaries that might be worth setting up is as a general principle, have some pillars of conduct that align with who you are, but also in the direction you're going, and maybe some ethics behind the keys to a relationship, because that'll give you the universe that you can navigate in, instead of having to continuously inform people about the way that you want to operate, because it's also not their responsibility to be who you want them to be, and vice versa is my point, right? So by assuming the responsibility of the way the conversation goes, it all belongs to you.
I wrote earlier today exactly that responsibility part, and just that you have to be, we are only responsible for our own behaviors and feelings and thoughts. Though I guess from a coaching perspective, there's three, definitely. My girlfriend is not as, because there's less conflict there with the girlfriend that I talked to yesterday and today about the things that she's going through. Mm-hmm. She was texting me while the conversation she was having with somebody, and I said, "Is he on a loop?" And she said, "Yes." So, a loop. He's basically trying to convince her to tell whatever it is he wants in a relationship. He wants to be with her. He wants to get married. He wants everything, and she's just like, "Whoa, no, this is what I want." And so what I said to her was, well, I was telling her in that moment, you use your boundaries and say, I need to pause and take a minute. You're on a loop and this is not helpful. So, because I said he's trying to wear you down to convince you of the things that he wants. So he's not really communicating with you and listening to what you want. He's just thinking about what he wants. He's protecting himself, he's protecting his heart. I get all that. So what is that like when you just mentioned boundaries earlier, is that similar to what you were talking about?
It's kind of impossible to talk about somebody else's direct relationship in terms of boundaries because you don't know what the profile of that conversation looks like in their head. So I'm curious about yours. Maybe your direct relationship with her, not the coaching that you would give her.
Right.
Because again, there's a scaffolding for the way any human being approaches a relationship where you can't speculate what's actually going on. Mm-hmm. There are other ways we conduct ourselves, but we don't know how people are thinking. And if we do have these ideas for the way we're supposed to conduct ourselves with others and expectations for the way they're supposed to react to the way we conduct ourselves, that's everyone's separate universe, right? And that's why I can't speak to hers. I can use mine to talk about hers, and then that just creates way more confusion. That's why we have wars.
True. Internal conflict and external conflict. I did say to her I said the truth has to come from within you. You have to decide what you want for yourself, rather than fixing him or focused on what he wants. And I said, before you go into that conversation, you really have to know what you want. Yeah. If you go in there ambivalent, he will talk you into whatever he wants to talk you into. So she did send me an emoji with her, like the arm one, saying she stood her ground in the sense of like, I knew what I wanted going in. This is what I told him, and it's really not negotiable. So I'm proud of her for that. So that wasn't a coaching thing. That was more of a friendship and looking after her. But also, and ultimately, I said to her, and I said to these other people, that no matter what you decide, I am here for you. And I think that's important as well. So she felt good about it. And one of the things I said to her, I said, this is hard as fuck when you love somebody and you have to detox them. It's because they're part of their routine. They're part of your life. They've had the chemical exchange with each other. The connection is there. Although they love each other, it's not enough. There has to be a value. The value is alignment of values or alignment of your beliefs. But if he's trying to convince her of the things he's convincing her of, he's not respecting her. He's just thinking about himself. So, and she knows all this. So she's very comfortable with me saying all of that to her. As whenever I go to her with things, she's very comfortable with asking me the questions and digging with me. And what's so interesting with that is it's so much easier to tell other people just that, and then to actually integrate it into your own life, which is like, well, wait, I do believe these things. I need to step into that power and integrate those beliefs into my own life.
I like to use metaphors, and I gravitate towards flowers and plants because it helps inform about what our nature is and living in harmony with nature. And I think when we find ourselves in any relationship where we're trying to change others or where they're trying to change us, it's kind of like putting a stake in the middle of where a seed is growing and making it grow in a certain direction when its nature is to blossom, right? And my metaphor is there are stakes that are altruistic and there are stakes that are malicious, but it doesn't matter because it's still defying nature, someone's inner nature. And that's how I feel about boundaries too, to be honest. It's for us to be cognizant of what's going on when we interact with others. And sometimes communication, there's a way to communicate, but sometimes another form of communication is silence.
Massively.
And so if you do have a relationship with someone else where you are giving them some type of advice, you have to make sure that they're operating within their nature. Knowing what you want is a part of that. So I totally agree with you there. It gives you that sense of direction in navigating what your nature is. but it's our own battle to engage or not engage, and that is the choice of everything. So if you realize that you know what you want and a certain person doesn't align with that, then it's for you to figure out a way to engage and disengage during that journey towards the later means, or to separate from that other.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because they're responsible for everything they do, right? And I know you know that.
So yeah, there's that balance of learning to be a coach, and then not actually using that as often, but using more, just being the friend.
But that's okay. We were talking about Montessori schools. There's also the Waldorf schools, right? We are perpetual students, but part of the path of a student is also giving the coaching. And when you're talking in general, you are letting things out that might not have been conscious in your head. So if you're, using some type of unconditional love for a friend or a relationship, and you're giving them the best wisdom you possibly can, it also gives you information that you can apply back to your life. I don't think one comes before the other. You don't have to have it figured out before you give the advice. You're like, oh, this rings some bells, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to apply this. And that's why we coach. That's why we listen, right? It is that to me is the transfer of energy. Like, it's this, like Tai Chi almost.
It's a flow of that. Yeah. Tai Chi is definitely a flow of energy. And you just hit something. When Jess and I were talking, she's okay, she'll be fine. When we had a couple revelations as we were talking, just what you said. I didn't have it figured out. She doesn't have it figured out, but something was there. And as we talked through some of the challenges that we were talking through, but we both were like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. So for us, it's definitely a transfer of energy, and we're learning from one another. And she's actually studying to be a therapist. And one thing, and so this is kind of cool, and maybe I'm steering in a different direction, but my life coaching, her therapy degree, she's working on, and I said to her, what's been such amazing alignment is that when you are doing something that you love, I said, like this, starting this podcast, for example, and I'm obsessed with it, which I've told you, and it's just like, are aligning ourselves with the people we want to spend time with, the things that bring us purpose, and loving what we do. And so I was like, the more I do this, the more I'm super in my power of knowing who I am. I'm like, and maybe that's coming into like when I'm communicating this past week, I'm kind of like, this is how it is, and I'm feeling more comfortable being uncomfortable with that. So I don't know, for me, that's just like, that's a revelation at this moment. And maybe, and I did actually say that to her yesterday. I was like, these are the things that I'm doing right now that I love so much. Don't have to be great at it, just do it, then you become great. So because of this alignment, like our alignment, and rediscovering who I am, even more so, and creating who I am, and figuring out who I am. I love this journey. I just feel stronger, I feel more empowered. And it's not ego, it's like, fuck, I'm onto something.
This power that is coming to you is because you're going inward, and you've begun detaching yourself from things that you've assigned value to around you.
Yeah.
And now that you're doing this inward journey, and you're doing that work, all your power becomes much more present. You're not assigning it outwardly. And that's why you might recognize a disconnect in your relationships, because they're probably sitting there used to the fact that this person would devote a lot of it to them. And now they're realizing that the poles are shifting. And since the poles are shifting, they're more inquisitive as to what's going on with you. And that's a simple pattern. It doesn't matter what the qualities of that energy flow looks like.
You just nailed it.
Yeah.
You nailed it. Sorry, you keep going.
And Jess sounds like a good friend. I will say, hi Jess.
Yes.
Because that's the kind of motion you do want with friends. You want to contemplate together and get somewhere together. And it's not about having the answers to begin with. Yeah.
Nailed it. Yeah. She's she's amazing.
We were talking about direction, right? And having a direction and knowing what you want. Mm-hmm. That is so fundamental because once you start with that, you say, I know what I want, I know where I want to go, then you could say, I know who I am, because I am that end goal. I am that. The mere fact that I even imagine that means that there's an aspect of that within me. So the journey is becoming that, separating yourself from anything that makes you believe otherwise, and then simply witnessing how that picture comes together. The rest is commentary.
That was like a beautiful painting you just said. Your words. That was awesome. And something you picked up on with me is having that detachment for the values. We all have our values and our foundation. But I was so attached to that idea of values and alignment, which I still am. Like, there's still that essence. But something about this journey is detaching from that and just knowing who I am. And knowing knowing who I want to be, and that's still evolving. That's still, it's not, and that should evolve and that should change as I grow. But then when you have these moments, we're like, okay, what is that? You really helped me today already figure out what that was for me. Because you don't want to doubt yourself. You don't want to think, oh, is something wrong with me, or did I say too much? And maybe you do say too much, and you just say, well, if I said too much, it's not because I was looking to hurt you. It was not intentional. It's just what I'm this information being channeled. But yeah, I love that, the detachment of, like, almost in a sense of not giving a fuck.
Everything is always changing. Mm-hmm. Being, to me, is movement. Human being. We are moving through this experience maybe at a cross point of different dimensions. Dimensions has such a connotation to it, and it seems so hard to grasp, but there are many ways to look at this experience, and you're looking through the lens that belongs to you. Mm-hmm. And just realize that your prescription of those lenses changes over time as well. So sometimes you have to change out, right? Sometimes you have to change the way you look at things, but that doesn't separate yourself from the experience itself.
Mm-hmm. No, it won't separate. I guess you learn from it.
Is that confusing?
No, I love that. Well, go back to the word dimensions. What does dimensions mean for you?
I've been doing a lot of thinking about dimensions. The way they're described don't necessarily make sense to me.
Writing that word down.
And what is a dimension but another way to look at something, right? Or to measure something. It's a way to measure something. So an example, like, you take a line, you can measure the length, right? You take any plane and you can measure also a perimeter, essentially, and then the area of that as well. So there are, like, new ways to measure it. Then you take a three-dimensional object, right? And a three-dimensional object will have that plane, but it'll also have infinite other planes that are a part of that as well. And I can't escape this idea of the fact that a one-dimensional object, like a line, if you're in the first dimension, you can't see a line because there's no height to that. So you don't experience it visually. And I think everyone who lives in 3D wants to describe different dimensions as things that are visual. But I think where everyone's going wrong is that you can experience length in time. You can experience length in time. And so I actually think it's the first dimension, and nobody talks about that. everyone says in the 3D, and it is common sense, space and time, right? We live in space-time. Space is a plane. Time is length, it's duration. So my fundamental belief is that we are beings of the fourth dimension, where we are experiencing ourselves in 3D, moving across the length of time. So I believe, for example, that my future self already exists, and it's helping inform my present and past self and put me on the path of I am. So that's the biggest tangent I could possibly take away from relationships. But I do use form to inform things that are in the outer world, right? There's this concept of correspondence. Why do I use the plant metaphor for growth and for harmony? Because we can look at things to contextualize things we don't have information for by looking at their process, their cycle, and their patterns.
It's good
that
you, first of all, keep writing about it, because the more you write about it, you know that like it'll start to form, take form. Something came to me when you said that, and this is more of like, I guess, the psychology side of it, but I guess dimensions sort of come from like the subconscious, the unconscious, and the conscious levels as well. But you're also saying with dimensions, even though we're in the fourth dimension, we're still whole. We're this one human being on the whole. So the subconscious and the unconscious and the conscious level still need to be working simultaneously together. And again, like I'm kind of just coming with that information, not that I can speculate.
Yeah, I think again,
fully.
So being is movement is kind of what I said. I actually think the act of being does create the separation of the conscious, the subconscious, and the unconscious. Stillness is wholeness. Being is movement. Yeah.
So being for you is movement, and then, but stillness is wholeness.
If you think the concept of everything that is a paradox, which exists and doesn't exist simultaneously, informs something that is out of our world. It's transcendent. And so the concept of God, or the term I like more that's used in the Kybalion, is the all, because it's not intimidating, right? It's more easily perceivable, even though human beings can't necessarily perceive infinity. So there's allness, but then there's also void. So void being nothingness versus allness, and we are experiencing simultaneously both of those things. I believe allness is ever-changing, infinite creation, which is movement, change. And then stillness is when everything is complete. When everything is complete, that's equally all but equally void.
What's complete then? What's the complete?
That everything exists and nothing exists.
That's the paradox.
And everything's in between and nothing's in between.
I need to dive more into that book. It's so fascinating.
Yeah. All paradoxes can be reconciled. That's the principle of polarity. What's another subject that we can just surf right into? Because I feel like I'm going to lose some attention with...
You mean from our audience? Did you have... So something you wrote to me yesterday, I had written you a reflection yesterday. You asked how my week and weekend was, and then I responded to that. And then you had written...
Playing with the world.
Yeah, and one of the things, the universe, play along with the universe. That's all I can do. And so it was actually... That was a shift for me when you said that, and it made sense when you told me, but now that I'm actually applying it, it's even more of a shift that I felt still like in control of my thoughts, my behaviors, and my feelings, to play along. Yeah, it's powerful when you can shift your mind like that, and super thankful that, well, however you came about this perspective that you from your experience in New York, and probably even before that, and that you shared it, and then that's the knowledge that you have and the wisdom you have that's been a ripple effect for me, for sure.
I'm thankful to whoever gave it to me, and I'm glad it worked for you.
It resonates.
Yeah, I like scavenger hunts. I like mysteries.
That's right.
In this experience, we don't know the answers, right? So we can grind and learn them, or we can play and discover them and unravel them.
Everybody needs to play more.
There was a cool one. I've been looking into Rudolf Steiner quite a bit. I personally choose to be sovereign and not prescribe or subscribe to any other philosophies or ideologies, but I do believe in consilience across sciences and cultures and religions, and they can help us. There's wisdom in everything. And Steiner, he was one of the most outspoken influences of Rosicrucianism. And I won't be the one to give a crash course on Rosicrucianism, but it's kind of an intersection between Christianity and Eastern religions and philosophies. Maybe in not you, Siri. And maybe in India. So
One moment.
Okay. I'm teaching robots here about
Yeah, you are. Siri's very good.
Yeah.
She's like, tell me more. I'm curious.
But anyways, the symbol for Rosicrucianism is a cross with 7 roses in it. And I was at Bloomingdale's, which blooming, you know what blooming means, like the flourishing, the beginning. Dale means valley. A blooming valley. And we were talking about mountains and valleys, which is an interesting one.
It is.
But this woman who works there was wearing these earrings with crosses and 7 roses on them. And I asked her where she got them. And she said, "Oh, you have good taste." I was like, "Yes."
Yes, obviously.
And she said, "Essay." And she forgot she said that to me later on. But so it was almost a subconscious thing that just came out of her. It's really interesting. That night I went home and I was like, okay, well, time to look up essay. So in my research there. I
had to look it up when you told me as well.
Yeah, I just found it all interesting.
And I looked up the roses, like what that looked like.
So I looked up the definition of essay. And
it has a Latin meaning.
Yeah, and in philosophy it's called essential nature or essence. 2 traditions, each of whose essay is opposition to the central tenets of the other, which is Rosicrucianism. And I was like, I got the chills. And then I came across a saying in Latin, which was esse est Deus, to be is God. And it's a Latin phrase. And the person who wrote it, her name was Rosetta Babel. Rosetta Babel or Babel. And first of all, to be is God, right? The I am is the central sentiment. But, bless you.
Thank you.
But that informed the direction of like research that I wanted to go into. So I started learning about the Tower of Babel. And through the Tower of Babel, there's a message embedded, and I haven't really integrated it yet, but some of the information that was coming applied to different parts of my life and gave me context. So it doesn't matter, like I think just to not digress into those stories and keep it here where we're having a conversation, it was a fun game.
That's a fun game. And
yeah, it's a fun thing to tap into. So I'm glad you're thinking about that too. And again, there's no right or wrong, but if it works and it makes life more enjoyable, then I definitely encourage people to do it.
I encourage it as well. It's been more of a game. And then you had written something. Remember I had said, what came to me was the word connection, creation, and something else.
Mm.
They were all, and curiosity. I think I wrote, because you had written those 3 lines to me.
Sure.
Remember what those were?
I don't remember what they were, but I remember what...
Image, to imagine is to think, you said.
Really what I was meditating on when I said whatever I said was how the outer world has cycles which can inform our inner experience as well, right? Because we're like the microcosm of what's going on in the outer world. Sometimes we have to listen to if it's a moment of creating and building and thinking, or if it's a moment of silence and feeling,
Yeah.
you know, a material moment. And that's why we have to go into every day open-minded. Last time we came in here, I obviously love philosophy, but I was like, I just gotta be more feeling,
Yes.
more open, right? So there was a shift in like the immediate type of conversation we had because I recognized that I wasn't being open to whatever just wanted to come out.
Right.
I don't like that side as much because it's just not as interesting to me, but I believe it's equally important. And so there's something there blossoming. And that just goes into the harmony conversation again.
Why, if I may ask, does it not seem interesting for you?
I think it's because I'm on a path that compels me very, very, very strongly towards mystery.
Mm.
But I think maybe an underlying message within that is that transcendence for me might, not that I'm trying to escape, but transcendence to me, the overcoming of one obstacle, for me, might be that being in tune with love and devoting the self to that more than higher truth might be the path. I don't think we necessarily need all the information of our greater fourth dimensional being in order to achieve stillness and wholeness.
Wouldn't that be the journey then towards not working towards that, but that's part of the journey?
Yeah. You know, it's funny, we have to believe we are something before we have proof for it. And
Yeah.
and that comes first, right? And
But
so
it has to come first.
yeah.
Yeah.
Before the outer world proves it to us.
Mm-hmm. Instead of saying, I will believe once I receive, you'll be waiting forever
Yeah.
because you're not going to receive what you actually really believe then.
Yeah.
Believing without having to receiving, just knowing that that's a massive mind shift as well. No, it's actually the opposite of I'll believe it when I see it. Just believe it to be true. Believe it to be whatever it is that what you want it to be. And one of the things you did say was like that made me. You wrote, in order to think, you must imagine, or imagine before you think. I can't remember which one you said first, but similar to what you said was part of those messages that you're meditating on. And that's how I responded with my...
To be honest, I didn't really think too much about what I sent you.
I did.
But it's very nice of you
Yes.
to read between the lines.
I did read between the lines. Yeah. That's something I would do, though.
But that's okay.
Yeah. And if I didn't understand, if it didn't resonate with me, maybe I would ruminate on it, or I would reply back and just say, I would like more clarity. I'd want you to tell me more about what that meant for you. But you're right. It's just I guess it makes me realize sometimes I send people reflections and it makes sense to them in the way that it makes sense to them, and then they come back and later say, oh, that was helpful, that made sense for me, or I was able to align with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's always helpful to know that's and I know you were walking as well when you were walking and talking.
I'm always walking and talking.
Yeah. That's probably a good thing rather than being on your phone and typing. But no, I appreciated the sentiment and the message for sure.
Well, thank you for thanking me, not necessary.
Fine, I take it back.
Keep it.
Actually, the idea of receiving is interesting. Were you going to go somewhere else with your thought?
The idea of receiving is interesting.
Meaning, sometimes it is hard for us to receive a compliment or something that's a good thing that you want to, that you have to feel worthy and deserving.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know that you're worthy and deserving.
Yeah, I actually think they're traps.
You think of what traps?
I think compliments are traps.
Okay. So even saying thank you for that message is a trap?
No, this is me just being annoying, right?
Okay.
But
yeah, you're good at that too.
But philosophically,
I think that,
I don't care for any compliments or any praise. I don't care for it.
right. Because I do think there's a fine line
They're addicting.
for people who want that.
It's
who need
addicting when people say you're wise, you're good looking. These are things you have to find within yourself and believe them. I think I'm a handsome guy, but there have been moments where I didn't have a good conception of self, where it wouldn't matter the way anybody else looked at me.
Absolutely.
Second, I started to actually say it's okay to love yourself and wink at yourself in the reflection.
Yeah.
Give yourself the guns before starting your day.
Yeah.
The more people actually have seen that.
Yeah.
But I've also walked around with way more of a welcoming presence. I've looked people through their eyes, and it makes a complete difference.
Do you have an example of that, or just a moment, or just in general?
I would say stages of lives, right? Like we have this rhythm where we that we kind of follow, and for me, I have emerged from a more inner, darker learning moment, right? I had to really go into the soil and figure out what was there, and then when I found the nutrients in the soil, I was able to blossom out of it. And I would say that blossoming becomes my sovereignty in the way I decide to navigate the world, and the recognition of the power that I have to do so. So for me, that sovereignty is what I cherish more than a single quality of being perceived as smart or wise or good looking or business savvy. I just don't care, because I know who I am, and I don't let anybody else tell me who I am.
Yeah, that's right.
And even if it's good. So that's why it's a trap.
Yeah.
It's a little seductive thing, and I'm not going to latch what I think about myself onto that.
That's right.
And that's my rant.
That's your rant.
Yeah.
No, there's truth to that. There's so much truth to that. And going, circling back to my whole reflection from the first podcast, looking in the mirror and not seeing a blurred vision of who I was, because I was so lost and I didn't know who I was. And so I don't feel that way anymore when I look in the mirror. I will start winking at myself now, though, because you said that. I'm gonna start doing that, blowing myself a kiss, saying that, because I totally agree with you. It has to come from within. Though when somebody does compliment you, I think it's also okay to say thank you. And
yes, that part that I didn't give you a second ago is mean, but you just don't have to feel it.
It wasn't mean. It was just you being annoying,
yeah.
Which I'm getting used to. No. So it's getting the compliment, receiving the compliment, but receiving, I guess, not necessarily the word receiving is doesn't always have to be the compliment, but it just feeling worthy of receiving whatever it is that's being offered to you, or take what, it's almost like taking what you there's a lot of taking right now between us. I'm taking from you, but not in a way that I want to receive this mutual exchange of energy. I'm taking information. I'm taking on information.
That's a great point, because you can still accept things, even if it is a compliment, but you have to remember that you're choosing it because it aligns with what you want.
That's right.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it aligns with what you want, and you knowing who you are. And then if someone tells you the opposite, you're dumb, you're ugly, you're like, thanks. You can easily say thank you right back.
Yeah.
Because why should a positive thing affect you or the negative thing affect you more than the positive.
That's definitely another option, but to me that feels like more work, always having to decide what I'm going to take and leave, as opposed to knowing exactly what I want and who I am.
Just say thank you.
No, and saying thank you, of course, because you have to just be a human being and not an annoying asshole.
Yeah.
But,
I when someone says something to me sometime, my response is like the Friends thing where they, I don't know if did you ever watch Friends?
yeah.
Okay, well mine is like, that's the proper,
Yeah.
you fuck off, but
The two fists bumping into each other.
I love that. It's my favorite. My friends who listen to this will laugh at that because they know I do it a lot. Chandler. Oh, Chandler. He's no longer. He's transformed.
Yeah.
Yes, he's transformed to a different world, different dimension maybe.
From a worm into a butterfly.
The worm into the butterfly. He's a seedling somewhere.
I don't think any moment of any of our pods have made me laugh more than my moment of thinking that butterflies came from worms.
That was, I almost just spat my drink out, which is saying that, thinking about, oh no, it's just so funny. Yeah.
Like, where did it come from? A fucking worm?
I'm like, dude,
you have to laugh at yourself.
Guys.
Yeah. That was perfect.
It was perfect. And what's so amazing about that, you laughed, you were playing with the world, playing along with the universe, you were playing the game, and you went along with the flow of like, that was a moment that there was no ego involved. It was like, I'm laughing at myself. It's so important to laugh at yourself. I think it is.
Yeah.
With yourself, not, in a way that's just like, that was a funny moment.
I think it's one of the measurements for how happy somebody is or healthy someone is. How much do you laugh? How much do you laugh?
Oh, it's essential for me, for my nourishment and well-being.
Yeah. I also think crying, so important.
I find it cleansing.
Yeah.
I find it a release of whatever it is that's blocked in you.
Yeah.
And Sebastian was like, Mom, you okay? I'm like, sometimes I just need to get it out. I love it that my kids see me cry. And it's crying in all moments. We don't have to get into crying right now.
When you cry, sorry to interrupt you like that, but when you cry, you're in that, like, because we were just talking about how there are moments when we need to feel, moments when we need to think. Just to throw some metaphors your way, the sun is a symbol of thought and consciousness. It's like a masculine power, while the moon or darkness can be like the feminine feeling powers. When you cry, it's a cloudy. The sun is being blocked. You're more in a feeling state. The rain comes out of your face, comes out of your eyes. And I think in nature we see those cycles, the weather patterns. So we have to be in tune with them, who we are as well.
I've said to my shift girls something that's beautiful. I said more just that when it rains, I was like, first of all, it's out of our control, and why not just, embrace the rain and allow the universe is needing to cleanse itself, or for us. But I also like to say it cleanses the soul.
Do you want to plug Shift, your Shift girls?
Yeah, I'll do a quick plug.
So what's the podcast name? For context, Ashley has started a second podcast.
Mm-hmm. It's for moms that are talking about where we are right now. We laughed. I don't know that we cried this one. I will let you know the minute it launches. It's called Table Sit, and Blair came up with that. And it was really powerful, and the girls were super excited about doing it, and because I had started one with you, they were like, we can do this. I was like, we can do this. I'm ready whenever you girls are. Let's just dive in. And they were so, like, afterwards, they were just so proud of themselves. They were so happy. They were on cloud 9, and they were like, I can't believe we just did that.
That's beautiful.
It's beautiful. Definitely super excited about that.
I'm excited to tune in and hear like this different aspect of you come out, because I'm sure it'll be something completely different than what we share here. Me, no, it's not that I ever change, but certain people bring out different sides of you for sure. And this is such a gentle side of me, right? You get such a gentle side of me. Because in my other aspects of life, it's business mode. It can be pretty masculine.
Well, first of all, I want to recognize I appreciate the gentle side / annoying /
Yeah.
humor. And I do, and that's similar to what we started talking about communication. When you are communicating with somebody, and again, different realms of communicating, you have to feel that level of comfort and allowing the person to bring out in you hopefully, I think, a very beautiful version of you that I have seen. I haven't really seen the business sense, but I can sense the business sense that you would have, and that's.
It's still me, for what it's worth. It's really not that different.
But I hear it's still a different voice, perhaps. But I listening to myself on this other podcast. Yeah, I sound. It's me. You would be able to recognize me in my voice, but it's different. Yeah, there's a difference in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the banter as well. It's the four of us and how we got to know each other and how Shift came about.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 4 separate journeys, but coming together for one reason. And, even if nothing takes off from that, it's like nudging people to do things outside their comfort zone is one of my purposes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And it aligns with that, right? And I think those experiences of creating something and being proud of it are amongst the best experiences a human being can have, arguably. And so it doesn't even matter what comes of it. It's like that experience is what more than any material thing and any trophy can ever give you. So you won there. That was a win.
It's a win.
I read Anthony Bourdain's book last year, and really early on.
Teaching Confidential?
Yes. And early in the book, he has this line that just stuck so deeply. And he was getting into why he decided to be a cook. And he said there were 2 reasons he decided to be a cook. I love him.
Love him too. I read that book probably 15 years ago.
Oh,
so you have to
man.
remind me what he said. It was such a good book.
He said the reason I stuck with being a cook is because you got the instant gratification of making something with your hands and watching it come into the world, and it gave you a belonging to a subculture. I probably said it way more eloquently than that, but it stuck because that really is what we're doing. We are creators. We are also lovers. We are amongst one another doing this thing. So yeah, I mean, it's so cool to know that you and your path is already inspiring people, and then the inspiration has already created these energetic moments that have.
Is that a compliment?
Oh yeah, it's a hidden compliment.
It's a hidden compliment.
Well, I was having this really weird deja vu as I was talking, so I was losing my train of thought.
What was the deja vu?
This whole conversation.
Really?
So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, we also sit in here once a week now, so I don't know if it's an actual deja vu or if I'm just...
But that's the key of the ripple effect. And I said this to my friend Evelyn about some things going on for her. And she just left a job and she's going on to another job. And the response she got when she left was basically a standing ovation. And also the feedback was how much she's made an impression on their life, inspired them, and I don't think she really even realized it, which is even more powerful. And she loved hearing it. It was great to hear because I said, well, you're leaving them with the sense of increase. I said, babe, I'm #legacy. For me, legacy is important. And if you want, that can be a trap too if you want, but I think legacy is important. Where you do want to leave people with that warm and fuzzy feeling. When we leave here today, for me it's it's nourishing, it's warm, it's loving, it's all the things that I know that I appreciate and want, within, and desire. So yeah, I just said to her, I was like, that's your ripple effect, and you didn't even know you were doing it. And it makes you realize how impactful you can be for people, positively or negatively. But what you just said, I appreciate that, and I take that as a compliment.
It was a compliment.
but that's what's so purposeful about what we're doing,
and magnitude doesn't matter at all, again, because we've talked about this, but the breadcrumbs always lead to the same origin, right? So nothing's more important than anything else. That being said, when we are aligned, it helps people align. And that feels the best. That's when you're playing with the world. So when things are happening for you and you're curating, you're a co-creator, as opposed to being dragged along on a leash, that makes a difference in human beings. And so by being an active composer, helping other people write their own music, I think that's really powerful. So good for you. And I think you guys are going to have a great show. And I think you definitely have a lot of people that could benefit from that perspective, especially in that part of life.
That's exactly right. We want to be able to reach people who need to hear.
Where do you think the longing for legacy comes from? Where do you think
I would say part of me being a teacher, a Montessori facilitator, I would say legacy starts from that, is knowing that and I guess my perspective is the children aren't at home because the parents are working. So for me, this was like their second best place to be. You know, if they didn't have grandparents or family around, so they chose this Montessori school that I worked at. So I was like next of kin in a sense. So for me, legacy is important to know that their brain development at that age is so impressionable that I was giving them all the gifts they could be given in the classroom outside of being home with their families. So legacy for me started from not even realizing what I was doing, but just knowing I loved teaching and being a coach for rugby. And so in a sense, so legacy is important because I've inspired these girls to continue to play rugby, or they want to play rugby. They've been encouraged, they've been empowered. So those are two examples that just come to mind quickly, if that makes it. I mean, legacy is, and all these people we talk about that we read, they've set the legacy for themselves. Anthony Bourdain with his book, and he wasn't even necessarily doing for a million people to read it. It's like this is information. This is where I'm coming from. This is my experience. You can take it for what it is. So yeah, legacy, and it's just carried on for me to know that it's like leaving a positive impact on people.
Mm-hmm.
Does legacy ring true to you in any way?
It's just another one of those things I think about, right? And this didn't come through in what you were saying at all. I think what you said was pretty spot on in the way I view legacy, but a lot of the connotation with the term is credit. And credit is kind of missing the point. I think we love story, and that's why putting a face behind that and a name behind that can be powerful. But I also think the best influences are benevolent. I want my impact to not be associated with me. I want to be some type of influence that helps people think for themselves and look into themselves and do the experience for themselves. My grandma has this saying that she says, I want my last paycheck to bounce. I really, her last check to bounce, like her last, and I love that. Scratch your itch until it bleeds. Don't miss out on anything. And so that is my ultimate direction, and since that is what I believe fundamentally, like this world is what you think it is, what you believe it is. Since that's the way that served me, that's the only thing I'd want to empower anybody else with. Getting into dimensions is like my extracurricular. Getting into philosophy is extracurricular. I really think that there'd be this really interesting symbiosis in the world if everyone did play by their own rules. And that's a world I'd love to see. And so I want my influence to have nothing to do with who I am and what my name is. Right. I really want to nourish and nurture a bunch of sovereign seeds. Yeah.
And I guess that's the idea of the ripple effect, is when you do leave that impact, your name doesn't have to be attached to that necessarily, because what you're doing for me will have a ripple effect for other people, and it's not like they can just say, oh, it was Ashley, or it was but knowing,
When you say that, I do think it's important, because that looking at those effects we have on the world, by being conscious of those causes and those effects, we can make sure that we are actually doing what we set out to do.
yeah.
And if you just completely neglect the outcomes of the things that you profess or the way you behave, then that creates delusion. So I totally agree that there is a level of importance in ensuring that those ripple effects are the ones that you set out for.
That is awesome. Yes. That's what you set out for.
Yeah. Regardless, I believe even if we have negative outcomes, there are negative outcomes that were necessary in order to serve as catapulting mechanisms for other individual journeys.
Can you break that down a little more?
Adversity. Adversity. We don't want, I personally don't want to create any adversity. But adversity can throw people on a life path that gives them a sense of meaning. I'm going to open up this metaphor that I've said to you in the past, but I'd like for it to be on the podcast because it's been really helpful for me.
Okay.
And it's
Please.
Similar to the metamorphosis conversation, in that it uses non-human as a metaphor.
Right.
And it's a metaphor of a crustacean. And, I think adversity is really, really powerful and really important, and it really is depicted in this story. So again, not mine. It was a rabbi who he kind of recounts the story of being at the dentist and looking at a magazine that says, "How do lobsters grow?" And then the message that he unravels is the fact that when you're a young lobster, an infant lobster, you're in this tough, firm, rigid shell. And then as you grow, that shell becomes incredibly uncomfortable. And when that's uncomfortable, that lobster has to shed its shell. And what it does is it goes shellless and finds a place that's safe, and then it grows a new shell that fits its larger body, right? Yeah. And the rabbi in this case points out that the stimulus for growth was the state of adversity, the discomfort. The environment for growth was the vulnerability. And through that vulnerability, you find that new home, that new shell. And that could be a perpetual journey. But again, any form of adversity teaches us something. And if we keep, navigating the world, taking Advil, for example, to alleviate us from these stimuluses that are just trying to teach us something that's wrong, then we are missing out on opportunities. So just to bring this back, there's no possible way to continue living life if you feel an element of guilt in the way you've behaved in the past. Yeah. Because those negative things can go on to create adversity that gives meaning for others and helps them grow. Now, it's not the best way, but ultimately what it's doing is it's helping us all return home.
What do you mean by it's not the best way?
We don't actively create adversity for others. That's not for us to do. It's out there, but it is a part of this perfection that we're experiencing. It's
so important what you just said about people want you to feel guilty sometimes because of something you did or said, and that's on them. But I agree with you. It's like those words of like shame, resentment, guilt. Those are toxic in your body, and it's that. I guess that would be, would that be the catalyst of?
They do nothing. Think for a second.
Mm-hmm.
What does guilt do?
What does it do to a person?
What service?
It doesn't.
Does it have?
Oh no, it should
Yeah.
have no service. It should,
Yeah.
None of those feelings should be present.
Yeah.
They shouldn't even have compassion, actually, have grace.
Yeah.
That's forgiveness for yourself, because we're all going to fuck up. And I wrote that today. Was it today or yesterday?
What'd you say?
I said, we're all going to fuck up. We're all going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So offer yourself grace and compassion.
I have a buddy who, he's one of my favorite buds from Austin. I smile as I think about him because we always just have a really good time and laugh. We were working together and we went through some times together, so we were like true friends. And he's an artist. He's a musician. He actually raps and sings a little bit. And he has a studio. And for his studio, he asked me to make him a painting. And I made him a painting that was based on a conversation we had. And it kind of looks like a chalkboard almost, where it says, I'm going to look it up just so.
No, I would definitely want to see that. Is it something to do with having that compassion and that?
No, it's about making mistakes.
Oh, okay, making mistakes, yeah. And even that word mistake, it's just a decision that you made.
You said receiving earlier. Mistake.
You're so good about breaking down words. It's made me more aware. Like when you sent me essay, I'm like, essay, I've heard of it before, but not in that context. So, did you find it?
I found it. The painting says, part of the curriculum for success is to fuck up.
Let's see.
And so it looks like a chalkboard, but I threw errors in it.
Oh, yeah, you
intentionally.
did. Mm-hmm.
So there's like a caret, because it says for success in the caret above the part of success is fuck up, you know? So it's just kind of a play on words.
It is a play on words.
And that was just
That's
for his
awesome.
studio, so like as they work through things back there and create songs, they know that there's beauty in the mistake.
There is, for sure. Like, there's no such thing as like perfectionism. Just do the thing.
Yeah.
And it's...
Breaking things creates new.
Yep. I mean, even a broken heart, you are breaking and you're letting the light back into your heart. To love again, to love more, to allow your heart to grow again.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Easier said than done when you're going through a broken heart, but no, it does. It's releasing what needs to be released, let the light in, let the light out. Allow that heart to heal and grow and become more loving. Don't know how I got on that tangent from a fuck up to... But it's having that compassion, that grace, and just people who want you to just live in this, like, don't you have regret? And somebody asked me that, and I was like, no, I don't. I don't have regret because I'm introspective, because I reflect, because I will do better the next time. I will show up for myself. I'm not doing it for you, motherfucker. I'm doing it for myself. I'm showing up for myself. So if I don't embrace the fuck-ups, that darkness, then I'm pushing her away. And that's something I do write about. And it's so important that that dark shadow of me, for so long, I was just like, she's there, she's cold, she's sitting by herself. And one day I just had a revelation. I was like, no, she's part of, like, I'm one. Like, why am I not accepting her? I had to go in there deeply and just hug her and hold her and say, you're amazing. I love you. I got you. Let's do this together. And your darkness is amazing. It makes you who you are.